The old grandfather clock in the corner of the quiet corner bookstore chimed softly, a melodic whisper that Alara had come to think of as the heartbeat of her shop. 3 o'clock. The afternoon sun, filtered through the ancient oak outside, cast dappled patterns across the worn wooden floorboards, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny golden fairies. The scent of old paper, brewing herbal tea, and a faint hint of lavender from the sachet tucked behind the counter mingled in a comforting embrace. Alara adjusted her spectacles, which had a habit of sliding down her nose when she was deep in thought or lost in the pages of a new arrival. She was meticulously arranging a display of first editions, her fingers tracing the delicate spines with a reverence born of true love for literature. Her own life, she often felt, was a collection of well-loved stories, some whimsical, some poignant, all treasured. At 32, she had built a haven for herself and her community in Oakhaven, a town nestled in a valley that seemed to exist just outside the hurried pace of the modern world. Oakhaven was a place where neighbors knew each other's names, where the baker still handed out warm samples, and where the autumn leaves truly turned into a kaleidoscope of fire and gold. The quiet corner, with its overflowing shelves, mismatched armchairs, and resident ginger cat, Marmalade, perfectly embodied the town's gentle spirit. Alara had inherited the shop from her beloved Aunt Beatrice 5 years ago, trading a fledgling career in city publishing for the quieter, more fulfilling rhythm of small-town life. She'd never regretted it. Still, there were moments, especially on quiet afternoons like this, when a subtle ache settled in her chest, a yearning for a story of her own that went beyond the pages. She loved her life truly, but there was a space, a silent page waiting to be filled by someone else's presence. She believed in grand romances, in the kind of love stories that unfolded slowly, like a cherished classic. Perhaps that was why she found herself a little wary of the swift, often superficial connections she'd seen in the city. Here, in Oakhaven, she hoped for something deeper, something that felt as real and enduring as the books she curated. A soft tinkle of the bell above the door announced a new arrival. Alara looked up, a welcoming smile already forming on her lips, but it faltered slightly when she saw him. He wasn't a regular. In fact, he was entirely new to her. He was tall, with broad shoulders encased in a tweed jacket that looked perfectly at home in a bookstore. His hair was a rich, dark brown, falling just a little too long over his collar, giving him a thoughtful, slightly disheveled air. But it was his eyes that caught her, a startling shade of hazel, flecked with gold, that seemed to hold a quiet intensity. He carried himself with a gentle grace, almost as if he were trying not to disturb the peace of the shop. He didn't make a beeline for any particular section, but rather drifted, his gaze sweeping over the shelves with an unhurried appreciation. Alara watched him discreetly from behind the counter, a warmth spreading through her veins that had nothing to do with the herbal tea she'd been sipping. He paused at the poetry section, his long fingers trailing over the spines of Whitman and Dickinson, then moved to the classics, eventually settling in the philosophy aisle. He picked up a copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, turning it over in his hands, his brow furrowed in a way that suggested deep contemplation. He seemed utterly absorbed, a man at peace in a world of words. Alara found herself wondering about him. Was he new to Oakhaven? What brought him to the quiet corner? She hadn't seen his face around town before, and Oakhaven was small enough that new faces tended to stand out. Marmalade, usually aloof with strangers, emerged from his sunbeam napping spot and wound his way around the man's ankles, purring with an unusual enthusiasm. The man stooped, a soft smile gracing his lips as he gently scratched behind Marmalade's ears. It was a small gesture, but Alara found herself charmed. A man who was kind to cats was usually a good sign. He eventually made his way to the counter, the copy of Meditations clutched in one hand. His movements were quiet, almost considered. When he met her gaze, his hazel eyes held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher: curiosity? Recognition? She felt a blush rise to her cheeks, a sensation she hadn't experienced in far too long. "Just this one, today," he said, his voice a low, pleasant baritone, a gentle rumble that seemed to vibrate softly in the quiet air. "A good choice," Alara managed, her voice a little breathier than usual. She took the book, her fingers brushing his for a fleeting moment. A spark, A tiny, almost imperceptible jolt passed between them. It was enough to make her heart skip. "I find myself returning to it often," he replied, a faint smile playing on his lips. "A reminder to stay grounded." Elara nodded, her eyes lingering on his. "Indeed, especially in tumultuous times." "Precisely." He offered a small knowing smile, and for a moment, it felt like they were sharing a secret, a quiet understanding whispered between the pages of an ancient text. She rang up the sale, her fingers fumbling slightly with the keys. "That'll be $17.50. He handed her a 20, and Elara found herself admiring the elegant lines of his hand, the way his fingers curled around the bills. "Thank you," he said, accepting his change and the bagged book. "This is a lovely shop, by the way. A true sanctuary." "Thank you," Elara said again, feeling a warmth spread through her. "I try to make it so." He hesitated for a moment, his gaze sweeping around the store again, as if committing it to memory. "I'm Liam," he offered, his eyes returning to hers. "Elara," she replied, her smile feeling genuine and bright. "Welcome to Oakhaven, Liam." "Thank you, Elara." He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and walked out, the bell above the door tinkling softly in his wake. Elara stood behind the counter, a faint smile on her face, the scent of cedar and old paper seeming to linger in the air long after he was gone. Liam. The name felt good on her tongue, a gentle hum against her thoughts. She found herself wondering what brought him to Oakhaven, what kind of life he led. It was a familiar feeling, this quiet curiosity, but with Liam, it felt different, more potent. The next few days were busier, filled with regulars seeking recommendations, children captivated by illustrated tales, and the usual hustle of ordering and shelving. But even amidst the joyful chaos, Elara found her thoughts drifting back to Liam. His quiet intensity, his kind eyes, the way he'd cradled a meditations as if it were a fragile treasure. Then, a week later, he returned. It was a Tuesday afternoon, another quiet day, the kind of day that invited reflection. The bell chimed, and there he was, standing just inside the doorway, his gaze finding hers with a flicker of recognition. He wore a different jacket this time, a dark denim, but the same thoughtful expression. He didn't immediately approach the counter. Instead, he drifted towards the history section, his fingers once again tracing the spines. Elara watched him, a quiet flutter beginning in her chest. She found herself anticipating his visits, a new rhythm to her days. She wondered if he would pick another philosophical text, or something entirely different. He eventually settled on a biography of a lesser-known female explorer, Bessie Coleman. An interesting choice, Elara thought, intrigued. He also picked up a small, beautifully illustrated book on celestial navigation. This time when he approached the counter, Elara felt a little less flustered. "Another excellent selection, Liam," she said, her voice steadier. He offered a small smile. "I have a penchant for stories of courage and the unknown." "A good combination," Elara agreed, her eyes twinkling. "Are you new to Oakhaven, if you don't mind me asking? I haven't seen you around before." He hesitated, then nodded. "I am. I've been here for a couple of weeks now. Needed a change of scenery, a place to focus." He gestured vaguely with the books. "Working on a project." "Oh, are you a writer?" she asked, a hopeful note in her voice. A writer in a bookstore was almost too perfect. He chuckled, a soft, warm sound. "Something like that. More of an illustrator, actually, trying to capture the essence of forgotten tales. This town, with its quiet charm, seemed like the perfect backdrop for inspiration." An illustrator. Elara's heart gave another skip. She had always loved illustrated books, finding a unique magic in the way art could bring stories to life. "That's wonderful," she said, genuinely pleased. "Oakhaven certainly has its share of stories, both forgotten and still being told." "I'm beginning to see that," Liam said, his gaze meeting hers, holding it for a beat longer than strictly necessary. "And your shop, Elara, is full of them. It's enchanting." The compliment warmed her from the inside out. "Thank you, Liam. That's high praise from an artist." He paid for his books, and this time, their conversation lingered a little longer. He asked about the history of the shop, about Elara's favorite genres. She found herself sharing anecdotes about Aunt Beatrice, about the quirky requests of customers, about the magic she found in connecting people with the right book. He listened intently, his hazel eyes never leaving hers, and Alara felt a profound sense of being truly seen, truly heard. "I should let you get back to it," he said eventually, a reluctant note in his voice. "But thank you, Alara, for the books and for the conversation." "Anytime, Liam," she replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. He smiled, a genuine open smile that reached his eyes, and then he was gone again, leaving Alara with a delicious sense of anticipation. Over the next few weeks, Liam became a quiet fixture in Alara's world. He would appear, often in the late afternoon, like a comforting shadow. He never announced his arrival with anything more than the soft chime of the bell, and he never stayed too long, but his visits became the highlight of her day. He would browse different sections, history, art, even children's literature sometimes, always finding something intriguing. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. They talked about books, of course, but also about art, about life's little mysteries, about the quiet beauty of Oakhaven. Alara learned that he had moved here from a bustling city, much like she had, seeking a slower pace, a chance to reconnect with his creative spirit. He spoke of the challenge of translating emotions into visuals, of finding the heart of a story and giving it form. Alara understood completely, relating it to her own work of finding the perfect book for a person. She learned that his project was a series of illustrations for a collection of obscure folk tales from around the world, stories that had been almost lost to time, whispered from generation to generation but rarely written down. He wanted to give them new life, to ensure they wouldn't vanish completely. Alara was captivated. It was a project born of love and respect for stories, a passion she shared deeply. One rainy afternoon, Liam was browsing the local history section. Alara was perched on a stool behind the counter, sipping tea and trying to ignore the insistent tapping of a loose pane in the front window. The shop was empty, except for them, the rain providing a soothing backdrop. Liam eventually came to the counter, a slim volume on Oakhaven's founding families in his hand. "This looks interesting," he said, placing it down. "I've been trying to learn more about the town. It has such a rich feel to it." "It does," Alara agreed, ringing up the book. "The first families here were quite an industrious bunch, and full of secrets if the old gossips are to be believed." She smiled. Liam returned her smile. "Speaking of secrets, I'm curious, Alara. What's your favorite story? The one you return to? The one that whispers to you?" The question caught her off guard. She thought for a moment, tracing the rim of her teacup. "Oh, that's a difficult one. Like choosing a favorite star in the night sky. But if I had to pick just one, it would probably be Persuasion by Jane Austen. The quiet longing, the second chances, the profound understanding between two people who have weathered time apart. It's exquisitely beautiful." Liam nodded slowly, his gaze thoughtful. "Persuasion. Yes, I can see that. The unspoken depth, the patience of true affection." "Exactly," Alara said, feeling a warmth spread through her at his understanding. "What about you, Liam? What's your whispered story?" He leaned against the counter, his gaze drifting to the rain-streaked window. "For me, it's not a single story, but rather the act of finding them. The stories that are almost forgotten, the ones told in hushed tones around a fire, passed down through generations, the ones that teach us something fundamental about humanity, about connection, about wonder." He paused, then looked back at her, his eyes shining with a quiet passion. "I suppose my favorite story is the one I haven't found yet, the one waiting to be discovered." Alara felt a profound sense of connection in that moment. They were two people, united by a shared reverence for stories, for the unspoken depths of human experience. The conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from literature to art, from the beauty of Oakhaven to their dreams for the future. He spoke of his love for nature, for long walks, for the way light played on water. Alara shared her joy in baking, her fascination with local history, her quiet hope for a love that felt as real and enduring as the stories she cherished. The rain continued to fall, a gentle cadence against the window, and the grandfather clock chimed the hour, but neither of them seemed to notice the passage of time. It felt as though they were in their own little bubble, a world woven from words and shared understanding. "I should probably let you get back to your work," Liam said eventually. his voice tinged with reluctance. He straightened up, a faint sigh escaping him. "No rush," Alara said, perhaps a little too quickly. She felt a pang of disappointment at the thought of him leaving. "It's a quiet day." He smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "Still, I wouldn't want to keep you. But, thank you, Alara. These conversations are a rare pleasure." "The pleasure is all mine, Liam," she replied honestly. As he turned to leave, he paused at the doorway, turning back to face her. "I was thinking of taking a walk up to Miller's Ridge tomorrow. If the weather clears, there's a particular view I'm hoping to sketch. Would you, perhaps, consider joining me? I hear the bookstore is closed on Wednesdays." Alara's heart did a joyful leap. An invitation. A real one. Her cheeks flushed. I'd love that, Liam," she said, her voice a little breathless. His smile widened, a genuine radiant expression that made her own heart swell. "Great. How about 10 in the morning? I can meet you here or... "Here would be perfect," Alara said, a bright smile mirroring his. "Wonderful. Until tomorrow then, Alara." "Until tomorrow, Liam." He left, and this time the shop felt distinctly emptier. But the emptiness was quickly filled with a bubbling excitement. She spent the rest of the afternoon in a happy haze, tidying shelves, rearranging books, her mind replaying their conversation, the warmth of his smile, the invitation. Tomorrow. A walk. A shared view. It felt like the opening lines of a story she had been waiting her whole life to read. And for the first time in a long time, Alara felt a hopeful flutter that this story, her story, was finally beginning to unfold, whispered between two kindred spirits in a quiet corner of the world. The morning sun, usually a gentle beam filtering through her curtains, felt like an eager accomplice today, pulling Alara from sleep with a bright, almost mischievous glow. A smile bloomed on her face before her eyes were even fully open. Today. The word resonated with a soft chime in her chest. She rose, moving through her small cottage with a lighter step than usual. The scent of brewing coffee mingled with the faint, comforting aroma of old paper that always clung to her home, a legacy of the bookstore just next door. She chose her clothes with unusual care, a soft, moss-green linen dress that matched the gentle hue of her eyes, a simple silver pendant, and comfortable walking boots. It wasn't about impressing Liam, she told herself, but about feeling like herself, a slightly more radiant version. She brushed her auburn hair until it gleamed, then tied it back loosely with a silk ribbon, allowing a few wisps to frame her face. After a quiet breakfast of toast and marmalade, Alara walked the few steps to the written word. She unlocked the door, letting in the cool morning air, and placed a small hand-lettered sign on the counter, closed for a special adventure. A special adventure. She savored the phrase, a delightful deviation from her usual routine. Locking up, she took a deep breath, the scent of blooming honeysuckle from her garden mixing with the promise of the day. She arrived at the old oak tree, their designated meeting spot, a few minutes early. Her heart gave a little skip when she saw him already there, leaning casually against its ancient trunk, his hands in his pockets. He looked even more charming in the natural light, a simple denim shirt enhancing the breadth of his shoulders, his dark hair falling just so across his forehead. His eyes, the color of warm honey, lit up as he saw her approach. "Alara," he said, his voice a low, welcoming hum. "Good morning." "Liam," she replied, feeling a blush creep up her neck. "Good morning. I hope I haven't kept you waiting." He pushed off the tree, a relaxed smile on his face. "Not at all. I was just enjoying the quiet. Ready for a walk?" "More than ready," she confessed, the simple words carrying an unspoken weight of anticipation. They set off, their initial conversation a gentle meandering, much like the path they chose. It was a less trodden trail, winding away from the village and into the soft embrace of the surrounding woods. Sunlight dappled through the leaves, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and pine needles. "This path is a favorite of mine," Liam said, glancing at her. "It's not too strenuous, but it rewards you with a fantastic view at the end." "I love discovering new paths," Alara mused, stepping over a gnarled root. "It's like turning a page in a book you've never read before, full of unknown wonders." Liam chuckled, a warm, melodic sound. A perfect analogy, coming from you. I imagine your life is full of such literary metaphors. Perhaps, she admitted, a little shyly. It's hard to separate life from stories when you're surrounded by them all day. I can imagine, he said, his gaze thoughtful. I've always admired people who live their passions. You seem perfectly suited to your bookstore. And you? Elara asked, emboldened by his easy manner. What draws you to places like this? The quiet, the nature? He paused, considering. I'm an architect, actually. Or I was mostly in a bigger city. But I felt a pull towards something different, something more grounded. I moved here a few months ago, hoping to find a different kind of inspiration, a slower rhythm. To design spaces that feel like they belong ginning the landscape, not just jaunch it. Elara's eyes widened slightly. An architect, that's fascinating. So you build worlds too, in a way. In a way, he agreed, smiling. But with bricks and mortar, rather than words and imagination. Though, I think the best designs have a story embedded within them, don't you think? Absolutely, she said, her heart warming to his perspective. Every space tells a tale. Your home, your garden, even a favorite chair, they all hold echoes of lives lived. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from the philosophical to the playful. They talked about the subtle beauty of moss on ancient stones, the way sunlight filtered through different leaves, the quiet wisdom of old trees. Liam pointed out different bird calls, identifying them with a gentle expertise that Elara found utterly charming. He seemed to notice everything, from the smallest wildflower struggling through the undergrowth to the vast expanse of sky above. At one point, the path narrowed, and Liam instinctively reached out a hand, offering it to Elara as she navigated a slightly uneven patch. Her fingers brushed his, a spark of warmth tingling through her. He didn't let go immediately, their hands remaining linked for a few steps. A silent, comfortable connection. The moment felt natural, unforced, a gentle current pulling them closer. When they eventually separated, it was with a lingering awareness, a soft hum of unspoken understanding between them. As they walked, Elara found herself sharing more than she usually would with a new acquaintance. She spoke of her love for obscure poetry, the joy of recommending the perfect book to a customer, the quiet satisfaction of her solitary life. But she also hinted at a deeper longing, a sense of having put parts of herself on hold. I suppose I've always been a bit of a dreamer, she confessed, kicking at a loose pebble. And sometimes I think I've been content to live vicariously through the stories on my shelves. It's safer, isn't it? No messy emotions, no unpredictable plots. Liam listened patiently, his gaze steady and understanding. Safer, perhaps, he conceded softly. But isn't there also a kind of quiet bravery in stepping into your own story, even if the ending isn't certain? His words resonated deeply. She looked at him, truly seeing the kindness in his eyes, the gentle encouragement in his smile. I suppose there is, she whispered, a new resolve fluttering within her. After about an hour of walking, the path began to ascend more steeply, winding its way up a small hill. The trees thinned, and ahead, Elara could see the promise of open sky. Liam led the way, his stride easy, and soon they emerged onto a wide, flat clearing. Here we are, he announced, gesturing grandly. Elara gasped. The view was breathtaking. Below them, the village of Oakhaven lay nestled in the valley, its rooftops a patchwork of terracotta and slate. Beyond it, fields stretched out like a green and gold quilt, dotted with ancient oaks and winding streams. In the distance, the gentle undulations of the Blue Ridge Mountains faded into a hazy, purplish-blue body. The sky above was an endless canvas of soft azure, with a few wispy clouds drifting lazily by. Oh, Liam, she breathed, her voice filled with awe. It's magnificent. He stood beside her, his shoulder almost brushing hers, a quiet satisfaction on his face. I found this spot a few weeks after I arrived. It felt right, like looking down on a story unfolding full of possibility. Elara nodded, her gaze sweeping across the panoramic landscape. It does. It feels like a place where you can truly breathe. Truly, They stood in comfortable silence for a long moment, simply soaking in the beauty. The breeze was soft, carrying the scent of pine and wild honeysuckle. The only sounds were the distant chirping of birds and the rustle of leaves. It was a moment suspended in time, a shared breath between two people who were just beginning to discover the depth of their connection. "This is the shared view," Liam finally said, his voice soft, almost intimate. "The one I told you about." "It's even more beautiful than I imagined," Alara replied, turning to him, her eyes shining. "Thank you for bringing me here." He met her gaze, his eyes warm. "I had a feeling you'd appreciate it." They found a smooth, sun-warmed rock to sit on, their conversation resuming, in a more reflective tone. Liam spoke of his early days as an architect, the excitement of design, but also the disillusionment with the corporate world, the pressure to build quickly and cheaply, often at the expense of beauty and sustainability. "I wanted to create places that felt like home, not just houses," he explained, picking up a small smooth stone and turning it in his fingers. "Places that fostered connection, that honored the environment. This move, this slower pace, it's about getting back to that core belief." Alara listened, captivated. "That's a beautiful mission, Liam, to create spaces that resonate with the soul." "And what about your mission, Alara?" he asked, turning his gaze back to her. "Beyond finding the perfect book for a customer, what's the story you're trying to write for yourself?" Her heart fluttered. It was a deeply personal question, one she hadn't truly articulated even to herself in years. "I think I want to find my own story," she admitted, looking out at the distant mountains. "For a long time, I was content to live in the stories of others. I built a lovely, safe little world in my bookstore, surrounded by words. But lately, I felt a longing for something more. To be a protagonist, not just a narrator." "And what kind of protagonist would you be?" Liam prompted gently. A small smile played on her lips. "I think a brave one. One who takes chances. One who allows herself to feel things, even the messy, unpredictable ones." She looked at him, a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "It's scary, though, stepping out of the margins and into the main narrative." Liam reached out, his hand gently covering hers where it rested on the rock. His touch was warm, reassuring. "It is, but you don't have to do it alone. Sometimes, a good story needs a supporting character, or even a co-author, to help it along." His words, simple and heartfelt, sent a wave of warmth through Alara. She squeezed his hand lightly, a silent acknowledgement of the comfort and hope he offered. The silence that followed was not empty, but full, brimming with unspoken feelings and mutual understanding. After a while, the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the valley. They decided it was time to head back. The walk down was easier, their steps lighter, their conversation filled with a comfortable intimacy that felt years in the making. They talked about their favorite authors, the quirks of small-town life, the simple joys that often went unnoticed in the rush of the world. As they reached the edge of the village, Liam gestured towards a small, charming cafe with outdoor seating. "How about we grab some tea or coffee? I could do with a warm drink after that invigorating walk." "That sounds wonderful," Alara agreed, her stomach rumbling faintly. They settled at a small wrought iron table beneath a blooming wisteria vine. The cafe was cozy, filled with the gentle clatter of cups and the murmur of quiet conversations. They ordered Earl Grey tea for Alara and a strong black coffee for Liam. "So," Liam began, leaning forward slightly, "tell me more about the written word. What's your favorite part about owning a bookstore?" Alara's eyes lit up. "Oh, everything. The smell of old paper, the quiet hum of people browsing, the thrill of unwrapping a new delivery, but mostly, it's the connections." "I like that," Liam said, a genuine smile gracing his lip. "A matchmaker for souls and stories. It fits you perfectly." He paused, stirring his coffee. "Do you ever think about expanding? Or perhaps adding a reading nook, a little cafe component to it?" Ilara's eyebrows rose. "Funnily enough, I've been dreaming of that. A cozy corner with a few armchairs, perhaps a small espresso machine. But it feels like a big undertaking, and I've always been a bit hesitant to disrupt the quiet sanctity of the space. Sometimes quiet sanctity can be enhanced by a little warmth and shared experience," Liam offered gently. "It doesn't have to be a disruption. It could be an evolution. Imagine, people enjoying a cup of coffee while lost in a new world, right there among the shelves. His vision resonated with her, echoing her own half-formed desires. "You have a knack for seeing the potential in things, don't you?" she mused, a thoughtful smile on her face. "It's part of being an architect," he said with a shrug, though his eyes held a deeper meaning. "Seeing what ain't gotta be, not just what is." They talked for another hour, sharing anecdotes, discovering more common ground than either had expected. They both loved the scent of rain, the sound of crackling fires, the feeling of a well-worn book in their hands. They both had a quiet appreciation for the small, often overlooked beauties of life. Liam told her about his current project, a sustainable community center he was sketching out for a nearby town, incorporating local materials and passive solar design. Ilara found herself utterly fascinated by his passion and his thoughtful approach to his craft. As the afternoon wore on, a comfortable ease settled between them, the kind that felt like a familiar blanket. There was no need to fill every silence. They simply existed, content in each other's presence. Finally, Liam checked his watch, a soft sigh escaping him. "I should probably let you get back to your bookstore before your special adventure closes for good." Ilara laughed, a genuine melodious sound that surprised even herself. "It's been a truly special adventure, Liam, more special than I could have imagined." They walked back towards the written word, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. As they reached her cottage door, Liam paused. "Thank you, Ilara," he said, his gaze warm and direct, "for sharing your afternoon, your stories, and your view of the world." "Thank you, Liam," she replied, her voice soft, "for the walk, the view, and for making me feel seen." A gentle smile touched his lips. He reached out, his fingers lightly brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was fleeting, yet it sent a shiver of delight through her. "I'd like to do it again, Ilara, soon." "I'd like that very much," she whispered, her heart doing a happy little dance. He nodded, a silent promise in his eyes, then turned and walked away, his figure disappearing around the bend in the street. Ilara watched him go, then slowly, almost reverently, unlocked her bookstore door. The scent of old paper and quiet stories enveloped her, but today, it felt different. It felt infused with the fresh air of the mountains, the warmth of a shared smile, and the gentle touch of a hand. She changed the closed sign to open, but she knew, deep in her heart, that something inside her had irrevocably opened too. She tidied a few shelves, her fingers tracing the spines of familiar books, but her mind was replaying every moment of the day. Liam's easy laugh, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the comforting weight of his hand in hers, his quiet understanding of her deepest longing. For the first time in a long time, the stories on her shelves didn't feel like an escape, but a reflection. She was ready to write her own, with all its beautiful, messy, unpredictable chapters. And as the last rays of sunlight streamed through the bookstore window, painting the dust motes in golden light, Ilara knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that this was just the beginning. The opening lines had been whispered, the first chapter had begun, and she felt a hopeful, exhilarating flutter for all the pages yet to turn. The opening lines had been whispered, the first chapter had begun, and she felt a hopeful, exhilarating flutter for all the pages yet to turn. The next morning, Ilara woke with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The scent of brewing coffee from her tiny kitchen apartment above the bookstore seemed crisper, the sunlight streaming through her window brighter. She dressed in a soft floral dress, a departure from her usual muted tones, and found herself humming as she descended the creaking stairs to unlock the written word. The bookstore, her sanctuary, now felt like a stage waiting for its play. She polished the worn wooden counter with a new vigor, rearranged a display of classic novels with a fresh eye, imagining them as characters waiting for their cues. The day unfolded with a gentle rhythm, a few regulars browsing, a student picking up a textbook. Ilara found herself smiling more, engaging in longer conversations, a quiet energy thrumming beneath her calm exterior. It was late afternoon when he walked in. The bell above the door chimed, a sound Ilara usually barely registered, but this time it seemed to resonate with the echo of her morning's revelation. He was tall, with a lean build, and hair the color of rich earth, slightly tousled as if he'd just run his hands through it. His eyes, a warm hazel, scanned the shelves with an intelligent curiosity that immediately drew her attention. He wore a soft, charcoal gray sweater that looked wonderfully comfortable and carried a worn leather satchel slung across his shoulder. He didn't head for the bestsellers or the new releases, but rather drifted towards the architecture and design section, his fingers trailing lightly over the spines. Alara watched him from behind the counter, a faint blush warming her cheeks. He wasn't overtly handsome in a movie star way, but there was an understated charm about him, a quiet intensity that was utterly captivating. After a few minutes, he turned, a large, heavy book in his hands. It was a rare edition on sustainable design, one Alara had personally sourced and cherished. He approached the counter, a faint, friendly smile gracing his lips. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice a low, pleasant rumble. "I didn't expect to find this here. It's quite a find." Alara felt a pleasant warmth spread through her. "It is, isn't it? I have a soft spot for design that respects its environment." "Me too," he replied, his gaze meeting hers, and for a moment, the world outside the bookstore seemed to fade away. "I'm Julian Vance." "Alara Finch," she responded, extending a hand over the counter. His grip was firm, warm, and sent a tiny shiver down her arm. "It's a beautiful name, Alara," he said, releasing her hand slowly. "And a beautiful shop. I'm an architect, just moved into town to work on the old Henderson building renovation down the street." Alara's eyes widened slightly. The Henderson building was a local landmark, a grand old Victorian structure that had stood empty for years. "Oh, that's wonderful. It's such a shame to see it crumbling." "My thoughts exactly," Julian agreed, a spark of passion lighting his hazel eyes. "I believe every old building has a story, and it's our job to help it tell it again, but with a fresh perspective. Much like books, I suppose." He gestured to the shelves around them. Alara laughed, a genuine, joyful sound that surprised even herself. "Exactly, you understand." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from architectural history to favorite authors, from the charm of small towns to the importance of preserving beauty. Julian had a way of listening intently, making her feel as though her every word was fascinating. He purchased the heavy design book, but lingered, asking about local coffee shops, about the history of Alara's bookstore, about her favorite reading nook. When he finally left, promising to return soon to browse the local history section, the silence he left behind felt different. It wasn't empty, but filled with the echo of his voice, the warmth of his smile. Alara found herself touching the counter where his hand had rested, a soft smile playing on her lips. The first chapter indeed. The next few weeks became a delightful pattern. Julian became a regular presence in the written word. He would arrive in the late afternoon, often with a sketchbook tucked under his arm, and settle into one of the plush armchairs in the reading nook. He never interrupted Alara if she was busy with a customer, but would offer a quiet nod, a gentle smile. He'd browse the history section, the art books, sometimes even the poetry, always finding something to discuss with Alara. Their conversations grew longer, deeper. He learned about her love for classic literature, her dream of restoring the small garden behind the bookstore, her quiet joy in connecting people with stories. She learned about his passion for sustainable design, his travels to ancient ruins, his quiet moments sketching the intricate details of old buildings, and a wistful longing for a place to truly call home after years of moving for various projects. One rainy Tuesday, when the bookstore was particularly quiet, Julian found Alara reshelving a towering stack of returned books. He put down the history of local architecture he'd been perusing and came to lean against the counter. "You know," he began, his gaze thoughtful, "the way you talk about these books, it's like each one is a friend. You know their quirks, their best qualities, who they'd get along with." Alara chuckled, adjusting a particularly stubborn volume. "Well, after spending so much time with them, they do start to feel like companions. And every person who walks in here is looking for a companion, aren't they? A story to get lost in, a character to connect with." Julian nodded, a genuine warmth in his hazel eyes. "And you're the matchmaker." He paused and added, "It's a beautiful role, Alara. Not everyone gets to spend their days surrounded by so much meaning." His words touched a chord deep within her. For so long she had felt her life was small, a quiet existence defined by the stories of others. But Julian saw it differently. He saw the beauty, the purpose, the quiet magic in what she did. It made her feel seen, truly seen, in a way no one had before. "What about you, Julian?" she asked, feeling a surge of courage. "What kind of story are you hoping to build with the Henderson renovation? Beyond the bricks and mortar, I mean." He leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. "A place for connection, I hope. A space where people can gather, create, share. The town needs a hub, somewhere vibrant. I want to honor its history, but also usher in a new chapter, a place where new stories can begin." He looked at her, his smile gentle. "Much like this place, in its own way." Their eyes met again, and in that shared glance, Alara felt a silent understanding pass between them. It was more than just shared interests. It was a resonance of spirit, a recognition of similar values and hopes. The rain drummed softly against the large front window, creating a cozy, intimate atmosphere around them. "You know," Julian said, breaking the comfortable silence, "there's a small coffee shop across the square that does a magnificent Earl Grey, and their shortbread is legendary. Would you be willing to take a break and join me for a cup? My treat?" He gestured vaguely towards the square. Alara's heart gave a little flutter. It wasn't a grand gesture, no sweeping declaration, but the quiet invitation, the genuine hope in his eyes, felt more significant than any dramatic pronouncement. It was an invitation to step out of her beloved bookstore, to share a moment in the wider world, with him. She hesitated for only a second. "I like that very much, Julian." Leaving the bookstore unattended for an hour felt like a daring adventure. She left a "Be Back Soon" sign on the door, something she rarely did, and walked across the square with Julian, the soft rain dampening her hair. The air was cool and fresh, and the scent of damp earth mingled with the aroma of coffee from the shop. Inside, the coffee shop was warm and inviting, bustling with a gentle hum of conversation. They found a small table by the window from which Alara could just glimpse the familiar facade of the written word. Julian ordered for them, remembering her preference for a dash of milk in her tea from an earlier conversation. They talked about everything and nothing. Julian shared stories of his childhood, growing up in a small town much like this one, his fascination with how buildings shaped lives. Alara spoke of her own journey to owning the bookstore, her initial shyness, her gradual blossoming amidst the pages. She found herself confiding in him about her recent realization, about wanting to live her own story, not just read about others. Julian listened intently, his gaze unwavering and kind. "That's a beautiful realization, Alara," he said softly, stirring his tea. "And you deserve to live a magnificent one. Sometimes the most profound stories are the ones we craft ourselves, day by day, moment by moment." He paused, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "And sometimes, those stories are even better when shared." The implication hung in the air, a delicate thread of possibility. Alara felt her cheeks flush again, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the Earl Grey. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the square, they walked back to the bookstore. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled clean and vibrant. At her door, Julian paused. "Thank you, Alara," he said, his voice a little softer than usual. "For the tea, for the conversation, for being you." "Thank you, Julian," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "It was lovely." He smiled, a slow, tender smile that reached his eyes. "I'll see you soon." And with a final lingering look, he was gone, disappearing into the twilight. Alara unlocked the bookstore, the chime of the bell sounding particularly sweet. She moved through the familiar aisles, but everything felt imbued with a new light. The books on her shelves, once her only companions, now seemed to murmur quiet encouragement. She wasn't just reading stories anymore, she was living one, and it felt exhilaratingly real. Over the next weeks, their connection deepened further. Julian found excuses to visit beyond just needing books. He'd bring her a fresh pastry from the bakery on his way to work, or a particularly interesting article on urban planning that he thought she'd enjoy. Sometimes he'd just drop by for a few minutes to share a thought, an observation from his day, or just to exchange a quiet smile. Alara, in turn, found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that surprised her. She'd meticulously tidy the architecture section, ensuring his favorite armchair was free, sometimes even picking out a new book she thought he might like. She found herself dressing with a little more care, choosing colors that felt vibrant and hopeful. One crisp autumn evening, as the leaves outside the written word turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson, Julian invited Alara to dinner. "There is a small Italian place, just a few blocks from here," he explained, his voice a little softer, a hint of nervousness in his eyes. "They have the most incredible homemade pasta, and I thought, perhaps we could talk without the interruptions of customers or construction schedules." Alara's heart did another one of its hopeful flutters. "I'd love that, Julian." She chose a dress she'd bought years ago but rarely worn, a deep sapphire blue that complemented her eyes. She felt a nervous excitement, a giddy anticipation that was both unfamiliar and wonderful. When Julian arrived at her apartment door, impeccably dressed in a dark blazer and a collared shirt that made his eyes sparkle, she felt a genuine thrill. The Italian restaurant was cozy, with flickering candlelight and the murmur of quiet conversation. They shared stories, dreams, and even a few vulnerabilities. Julian spoke of the pressure of balancing historical preservation with modern functionality, of his desire to create spaces that fostered community. Alara, emboldened by his openness, shared her quiet fear of stagnation, of becoming too comfortable within the pages of others' lives, and her burgeoning desire to truly write her own. "You have so much to offer, Alara," Julian said, his voice gentle and sincere. He reached across the table, his hand resting lightly over hers. His touch was warm, comforting, and sent a delicious shiver through her. "Your quiet strength, your passion for stories, your ability to see the beauty in the ordinary, it's all part of the magnificent story you're already living." Alara looked into his warm hazel eyes and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Julian didn't just see her, he understood her, and he encouraged her to be more, to reach further. He saw the possibilities she was just beginning to glimpse for herself. "And you, Julian," she replied, her voice a little shaky, "you build those possibilities. You see the potential in something old and forgotten, and you bring it back to life, with heart and vision." They lingered over dessert, sharing a tiramisu, their conversation winding through laughter and thoughtful silences. As they walked back to her apartment, the autumn air was cool and crisp, and the stars shone with a brilliant clarity. Julian walked her to her door, the porch light casting a soft glow around them. "Thank you, Julian," Alara whispered, her heart full. "Tonight was perfect." He smiled, his gaze tender. "It was, Alara, more than perfect." He lifted a hand, gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers brushing softly against her cheek. His touch was electric, sending warmth through her. He leaned in slowly, his eyes searching hers, and Alara's breath hitched. His lips met hers in a soft, tender kiss, a gentle exploration that was both tentative and deeply resonant. It wasn't a fiery kiss, but a kiss of quiet understanding, of burgeoning affection, of shared hopes and whispered promises. It tasted of coffee and tiramisu and something utterly new and wonderful. When he pulled back, their eyes met again, and Alara saw a mirroring of the joy and wonder she felt within herself. "Good night, Alara," he murmured, his voice a little husky. "Good night, Julian," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. She watched him walk away, his silhouette disappearing into the moonlit street, and then slowly, dreamily, she let herself into her apartment. She leaned against the closed door, her fingers touching her lips, a wide, blissful smile spreading across her face. The kiss lingered, a sweet memory that warmed her from the inside out. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her soul that this was more than just a fleeting moment. This was a new chapter, unfolding beautifully, page by page. Julian was not just a character in her story. He was becoming an essential part of its narrative, a gentle hand guiding her towards a future she hadn't dared to imagine. The next morning, Alara woke with an even greater lightness. The bookstore felt brighter, the air sweeter. She found herself humming a little tune as she opened for the day, and when Julian walked in, later that afternoon, bearing a single, perfect crimson rose, her smile was as radiant as the morning sun. He placed the rose gently on the counter. "Good afternoon, Alara," he said, his hazel eyes sparkling. I was thinking, the Henderson building? The old garden at the back is overgrown, but it has good bones. I'm starting to clear it this weekend. Would you perhaps be interested in helping me plan what to plant? Your knowledge of beauty and growth seems unparalleled. Elara looked at the rose, then at Julian, her heart swelling with a quiet joy. The idea of creating something beautiful together, nurturing new life, felt profoundly symbolic. It was another invitation, not just to a date, but to build something lasting, something shared. I would love that, Julian, she said, her voice soft with emotion. Absolutely love that. He smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile that reached his eyes. Wonderful. I'll pick you up Saturday morning then. Wear something you don't mind getting a little muddy. As he left, the bookstore felt alive with possibility. Elara carefully placed the crimson rose in a small vase on the counter, its vibrant color a testament to the new beginnings unfolding in her life. The pages of her story were turning, each one filled with unexpected warmth, quiet affection, and the exhilarating promise of chapters yet to be written. She knew there would be challenges, uncertainties, as in any good story, but with Julian by her side, she felt ready for whatever came next. The scent of old books and fresh roses mingled in the air, a beautiful fragrant blend of her past and her hopeful future. The scent of old books and fresh roses mingled in the air, a beautiful fragrant blend of her past and her hopeful future. Julian's hand found hers, a warm, reassuring presence that seemed to fit perfectly. They walked out of the bookstore, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows behind them, painting the cobbled street in hues of amber and rose. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, meandering from the day's book sales to the peculiar habits of neighborhood cats, to the quiet dreams they were just beginning to share. Elara found herself telling Julian about her grandmother's stories, about the magic she used to believe was hidden within the pages of every book. Julian, in turn, spoke of the quiet satisfaction he found in restoring old furniture, in breathing new life into forgotten pieces, a parallel artistry to her own. Their dates were never grand spectacles, but rather a collection of small, tender moments that stitched themselves into the fabric of their days. They'd share takeout on Elara's worn sofa, surrounded by towering stacks of books, or Julian would surprise her with a picnic basket filled with homemade sandwiches and lemonade, whisking her away to a sun-dappled park bench by the river. He'd often stop by the bookstore with a cup of her favorite Earl Grey, just to sit and read in a quiet corner while she worked, his presence a comforting anchor. Elara in turn began leaving him little notes tucked into the books he was currently reading, or a freshly baked scone from the bakery next door. One crisp autumn evening, Julian invited Elara to his workshop. The air hummed with the scent of sawdust and linseed oil, a stark but beautiful contrast to her bookstore's fragrance. He showed her a delicate antique writing desk he was meticulously restoring, explaining the intricacies of the wood grain, the careful layering of finishes. Elara watched, mesmerized by the quiet focus in his eyes, the gentle strength of his hands. He spoke of imperfections, not as flaws, but as character, as stories etched into the wood, and Elara felt a deep resonance with his philosophy. It wasn't just about fixing, it was about honoring the past while preparing for the future. As she traced the smooth, polished surface of the desk, she felt a profound sense of connection to him, to this man who saw beauty in the forgotten and crafted new life from it. "It's beautiful, Julian," she murmured, her voice soft. "You have such a gift." He smiled, a rare, gentle smile that warmed her from the inside out. "It's like your books, Elara. Each one has a history, a story waiting to be rediscovered." Their lives began to intertwine seamlessly. Julian helped her rearrange a particularly stubborn shelf in the bookstore, his practical strength a welcome counterpoint to her methodical approach. Elara, with her discerning eye, helped him select fabrics for reupholstering an old chaise lounge, their tastes blending surprisingly well. They discovered a shared love for quiet mornings, for classical music, and for long, meandering walks through the changing seasons. The quiet affection that had sparked between them blossomed into something deeper, a steady, unwavering warmth that settled comfortably in Elara's heart. She found herself sharing thoughts she hadn't voiced to anyone else, and he listened with an attentiveness that made her feel truly seen. Spring arrived, painting the town in vibrant greens and soft pastels, and with it came the annual Heritage Days Festival, a beloved local event. The town council approached Ilara, asking if the written word would host a special booth celebrating local authors and literary history. Ilara was thrilled, seeing it as a wonderful opportunity, but as the date drew closer, the sheer scale of the undertaking began to feel overwhelming. There were books to select, displays to design, historical anecdotes to research, and a multitude of logistical hurdles. One afternoon, Julian found her amidst a sea of open books and crumpled sketches, a furrow in her brow. "Everything all right, Ilara?" he asked, his voice calm. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's just a lot, Julian. I want it to be perfect, but there's so much to do. And the tent they assigned me is right next to the town crier's booth. You know, the one with the booming voice and the bell? I'm worried it'll drown out any readings." Julian chuckled softly. "We can figure it out. How about I help you with the setup? I'm quite good at assembling things, and I can probably rig up some soundproofing for your booth. Maybe some thick tapestries." And so, Julian became her quiet, efficient partner in crime. He spent evenings helping her carefully pack boxes of books, his large hands surprisingly gentle. He listened patiently to her ideas for display, offering practical suggestions that always seemed to simplify the complex. On the day of the festival, he arrived early, armed with tools and a thermos of coffee. He meticulously constructed the sturdy shelving units Ilara had designed, ensuring they were perfectly stable. When the town crier's booming voice indeed proved to be a problem, Julian, with a few well-placed hooks and some beautiful heavy velvet drapes Ilara had found, created a surprisingly effective sound barrier that also added an air of elegance to her booth. He charmed the grumpy vendor at the neighboring stall with a shared anecdote about gardening, and when a sudden gust of wind threatened to topple a carefully constructed pyramid of first editions, Julian was there in an instant, steadying it with practiced ease. "Ooh!" Ilara watched him, a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the spring sun. He wasn't just helping, he was invested, present, and utterly dependable. He wasn't seeking praise or recognition, simply offering his quiet strength and support, because it was needed. By late afternoon, the written word booth was a resounding success. Local authors had drawn a crowd, children were captivated by a storyteller, and the historical displays were generating genuine interest. Ilara felt a sense of triumph, but more importantly, a profound gratitude. She caught Julian's eye across the bustling tent, and he gave her a small, proud smile, a silent acknowledgement of their shared accomplishment. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long golden shadows across the festival grounds, they started packing up. The air was filled with the lingering scent of popcorn and blooming lilacs, a joyful end to a busy day. They worked in comfortable silence, their movements synchronized, a quiet rhythm established between them. Later that evening, back in Ilara's cozy apartment above the bookstore, they shared a simple meal Julian had insisted on making, a comforting pasta dish that tasted like pure contentment. They were tired, but a shared sense of accomplishment hummed between them. "Julian," Ilara began, setting down her fork. I really couldn't have done it without you. You were incredible today. Everything. The shelves, the drapes, the grumpy vendor, even just your presence." He reached across the small table, covering her hand with his. His touch was firm, gentle, and utterly reassuring. "It was my pleasure, Ilara. I love seeing you in your element, passionate about what you do. And besides," he added with a soft smile, "I enjoy working with you. We make a good team." Ilara's heart fluttered. She looked into his kind, steady eyes, and in that moment, all the unspoken feelings that had been growing between them seemed to coalesce into a single, undeniable truth. It wasn't just quiet affection or comfortable companionship anymore. It was something deeper, something that felt like coming home. "Julian," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I think—" A breathtaking silence hung in the air, broken only by the soft tick of her grandmother's antique clock. Julian's thumb stroked the back of her hand, a tender, slow motion. His gaze softened even further, a profound tenderness replacing the earlier playful spark. "Ilara," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble, filled with an emotion that mirrored her own. "You don't have to think it. You can know it, because I'm already there, I love you, Alara, more than I thought possible." The words hung in the air, precious and true, sealing the bond that had been forming between them. It wasn't a dramatic confession, but a quiet, earnest declaration, perfectly fitting for the gentle love they shared. Alara felt a lightness settle over her, a joyous certainty that smoothed away any lingering worries or uncertainties. She squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. Months melted into a year, each one deepening the roots of their love. The written word thrived, a beloved cornerstone of the community, and Julian's workshop flourished, his reputation for exquisite restoration growing. Their lives, once separate streams, now flowed together, mingling beautifully. They found an old cottage on the outskirts of town, nestled amongst ancient oak trees, with a rambling garden that Alara envisioned filled with roses and herbs, and Julian saw as a canvas for his quiet craftsmanship. It was perfect, a blend of old-world charm and the promise of new beginnings. One quiet afternoon, almost exactly a year after the Heritage Days festival, Julian led Alara on a walk through their newly acquired garden. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, dappling the ground in gold. He stopped beneath a particularly gnarled oak, its branches reaching out like ancient arms. "Alara," he began, his voice soft, yet resonating with a familiar depth of feeling. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, intricately carved. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was profoundly Julian. He opened it, revealing a simple, elegant silver ring set with a single, small emerald, the vibrant color of new growth, of hope, of the very first rose he had given her. "When I first met you," he continued, his gaze unwavering, "I saw a woman who carried stories in her heart, who found magic in the quiet corners of the world. And you, Alara, you brought a new chapter into my life, one filled with color and warmth and the most beautiful kind of love." He knelt before her, not with dramatic flourish, but with a quiet sincerity that stole her breath away. "Will you let me be a part of every chapter yet to be written? Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Alara's eyes, but they were tears of pure joy, of absolute certainty. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only a profound sense of rightness. This man, with his quiet strength, his unwavering kindness, and his deep, gentle love, was her home, her partner, her future. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh yes, Julian, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, its cool metal a promise against her skin. Then he rose, pulling her gently into his arms, holding her close beneath the ancient oak. The scent of damp earth, budding leaves, and Julian's familiar, comforting presence enveloped her. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair in the cottage garden, surrounded by close friends and the blooming roses Alara had planted. Julian, ever the craftsman, had built an arbor for them to stand under, adorned with white climbing roses. Their life together unfolded like a beautifully bound book, each day a new page filled with shared laughter, quiet companionship, and enduring love. The bookstore continued to thrive, a testament to Alara's passion, and Julian's workshop became a haven where he meticulously crafted pieces for their home, each one infused with their shared story. Evenings often found them curled up on their sofa, a book open between them, or simply sitting in companionable silence, listening to the crackle of the fireplace. Alara would sometimes glance at Julian, watching the gentle rise and fall of his chest, the quiet content in his eyes, and marvel at the journey that had brought them together. The vibrant red rose, a symbol of new beginnings, had truly ushered in a life more beautiful and fulfilling than she had ever dared to dream. The challenges and uncertainties she had once anticipated still came, as they do in any story, but with Julian by her side, they were never insurmountable. They faced them together, a united front, their love a steady beacon. The scent of old books and fresh roses now mingled, not just in the air, but within the very essence of their shared home, their shared life, a testament to a past cherished, a present embraced, and a future unfolding, chapter by heartwarming chapter, in the most beautiful, fragrant blend of all. And as the gentle moonlight streamed through their window, Alara knew, with a contented sigh, that their story was truly just beginning.